Now, Anglo American's Impact Finance Network hosted the 2025 Investor Fest, focused on scaling small businesses that need strong capital infusion in an economic ecosystem that depends on them. On the sidelines, I caught up with Emma Parker, Sustainable and Impact Finance Manager at Anglo American, to unpack what necessitated the establishment of this initiative in 2021, a time the country was dealing with elevated economic woes.
In 2018, Anglo launched our Sustainable Mining Plan, which is sort of our blueprint around sustainability. And it has really ambitious goals tied to sort of thriving communities and healthy environments. And as part of that, we've been trying to, I think as you probably heard from Mpumi earlier, reimagine mining to improve people's lives. And that reimagining of mining, it doesn't just tie to the way that we physically mine or the way that we work with our workforce. It's how we think about our role more broadly. So as part of, we had this sort of the purpose, which is really true to the business, and then these really ambitious sustainability targets that we're looking to achieve. And so bringing that together, how can we achieve these sustainability targets? How can we actually rethink our role as an organization to be able to innovate around social investment? And SMEs play such an important role in any ecosystem, but particularly here in South Africa. And so for us, it was a sort of a logical step of, well, if we want to support non-mine dependent jobs and economic diversification, working with growth stage SMEs is a really, really great way to do that.
And actually, a question I wanted to ask is that, do you support businesses within the mining ecosystem, or are there sectors that have a greater call for more capital flow, or does your reach extend across the board?
Yeah, so Anglo have lots of programs that do support our suppliers and trying to look at inclusive procurement. But actually the IFN tries to sit outside of that. So we're trying to think about, as Mpumi says, mines have a beginning and they have an end whenever it's going to come. And the risk when a mine closes is there's a huge amount of direct and indirect job losses. So working on supplier development and inclusive procurement is critical, and you can hear the amount that we've spent in our supply chains this year alone is huge, and it has a huge impact. But that risk and that impact, the negative impact that it can create when a mine closes, is also incredibly significant. So the IFN tries to support, and we focus on jobs that are not dependent upon the mine. So trying to create thriving ecosystems in the provinces and the countries that we're working in. And so that means that we work typically outside the mining value chain. And the businesses that we look at, they're called impact businesses. So through their products or services, they create a positive environmental or social impact. So it could be a solar company that's looking at creating renewable energy. It could be a regenerative agriculture farmer that doesn't use any chemical inputs, and they're producing, we've got one here, organic produce. So it really is a broad spectrum, but we want to support jobs that aren't reliant on the mine's presence, so we can think through that long term and beyond the life of mine. And companies that are going to support sort of positive environmental and social outcomes through the way that they operate.
Now, the IFN has been running for 4 years. Just highlight some of the key milestones that you have reached within that period, but also if you have any goals, any investment targets that you have in hand.
Yeah, so you imagine, you see the size of InvestFest, and we've already got 350 people here, and we're expecting another 250. When we first started with our pilot, as you said, it was COVID year, and we did a virtual pitch event where we had 8 businesses and a handful of investors. So over the last 4 years, we've gone from something that's quite small and had to be quite virtual to something that's incredibly in person with a big footprint, because we've worked hard to be able to be inclusive and to grow the network. Some of the key milestones, having a successful pilot was really important. What we didn't want to do was to develop a program that wasn't actually making meaningful impact. It's not about just running a program for the sake of running a program. We deeply believe that we could use our role and our capital to be able to make systemic changes in the investment ecosystem. So the pilot was important to test that. If we couldn't demonstrate that we could do that, then we would have not moved forward. But luckily, the pilot did show that. And I think then we had a one-day conference in Johannesburg in 2022, and I think we had like 12 investors that we almost had to beg to come. We've got over 100 investors here today and we've had to turn them away. So I think for us, that's a really important milestone, that we've created enough, I guess, trust.
Yes.
And we're delivering something that's meaningful to the ecosystem, that people want to participate. And that means that we can just multiply the impact that we have. We've now worked with over 70 businesses in South Africa. That's over 90 in Southern Africa, because we also work in Botswana and Zambia as well.
All right.
And raised, I know it in dollars, but over $100 million.
We can convert that. The rand is at 17 rand 30.
The rand's doing well right now. So and supporting in South Africa over 12,000 livelihoods, which is really the essence of why we're doing it. So.
And as you're talking about investors want to direct capital to eligible businesses, right, that are capital ready, so that they can use that capital for meaningful impact productively, right? But also there are those businesses that aren't quite there yet, that aren't quite ready to receive that capital so that they can make a meaningful difference. Do you look and work with those kinds of businesses?
So that's really what the IFN does, is that we provide pre-investment technical assistance to businesses that have really high growth potential and are investment worthy, as in an investor would want to invest in them. But at the moment, they're not in a position to progress through due diligence. You know, they don't have their documentation in place. Maybe their sort of business case isn't as clearly articulated as it needs to be for an investor to be confident that they can invest in that business. So we have a fantastic team of investment analysts that support on a tailored basis. They provide one-on-one support to businesses to get them investment ready, and also to coach them in how to engage with investors. You know, you are a business owner who's worked hard to grow a fantastic business. You're excellent at that. That doesn't mean you speak the same language as an investor, and so going and trying to raise capital from, you know, third parties, it can be really daunting and really difficult to know what to say and how to sell your business. So that's a big part as well, is to then coach the businesses. And then we've got a pool of probably a couple of hundred of investors, from philanthropic investors that are mainly looking at impact first, so not a financial return, through to venture capital, private equity, DFIs, and a whole series of alternative and bank debt providers. And then we support them to connect and through the transaction process.
Just lastly, as we wrap up the conversation, I see that it's not just South African businesses that you are working with and helping. It's also outside South Africa, within Africa, but select countries. And I'm wondering what was the motivation behind but also if there is a plan to maybe extend geographically.
Yeah, so we've been really lucky that after we did our pilot, we had the ability to grow in South Africa, but also to say this model actually is highly applicable in other markets that we work in. So that sort of potentially random geographic location that we work in is very tied to where we have footprint or where we have operations. So we're not only in Africa, we're also in Chile, Peru, and Brazil. And the program is slightly different there. It's slightly different in each market. It's tailored to what that market needs most, but is incredibly successul. So going forward, we've got some really exciting partnerships that we're hoping that we'll be announcing next year here in South Africa. There is also discussion about growing into other markets with other corporates, right? Anglo American acting as the sort of risk taker and the incubator of the program, and sort of supporting it for the needs that we have, but also wouldn't that be great if we could allow others to help meet their objectives by tapping into the program? So there's a strong growth ambition, whether that's domestically and really honing in the Northern Cape and continuing to uncover great businesses, or through partnership in some other provinces and other countries, both here in Africa and also in Latin America.
That was Emma Parker, Sustainable and Impact Finance Manager at Anglo American.